The morning began like any other in the gleaming corporate tower, with employees moving briskly through hallways carrying coffee, laptops, and the thin armor of professionalism. But from the moment the team gathered in the conference room, there was a charge in the air, an invisible tension that even the hum of the central air conditioning couldn't smooth over. Leela was the first to break the silence, as she usually was when she sensed a moment to command attention. "Nice ring, Rebecca," she remarked with a smirk that cut sharper than her words. "Vintage? Or just old?" A few of her usual supporters exchanged amused glances, indulging her cruelty. Rebecca, seated at the far end of the table, lifted her hand slightly, letting her eyes rest on the ring, simple, silver, worn smooth over years of touch. She didn't snap back. She didn't defend herself. Instead, she remained still, a quiet presence that bothered people like Leela more than anger ever could. Leela pushed again, this time louder, making sure her voice carried across the table. "It must mean something," she mocked, "because it certainly doesn't match your outfit." But Rebecca only inhaled slowly, anchoring herself in the calm she'd spent years learning. "It does mean something," she said simply. The room stilled, and for a moment even Leela seemed caught off guard. "My father gave it to me," Rebecca continued. "In his final week alive." A hush fell, the kind that ripples through a room when the line between banter and cruelty is crossed. The smirks evaporated. A few people looked away, suddenly interested in their notes. But Leela didn't apologize. She twisted in her seat, lifting her chin as if Rebecca's grief was an inconvenience. The meeting dragged on with Leela throwing glances that teetered between annoyance and suspicion. For years she had ruled the social hierarchy of the office, floating atop privilege she hadn't earned, speaking to lower-level employees with the sort of dismissive impatience only the sheltered learn. Today, she was particularly irritable. A high-value meeting with billionaire investor Elias Rourke loomed in the afternoon, and she had spent the entire week rehearsing the perfect persona she wanted him to see. In her eyes, Rebecca represented everything unremarkable, quiet, reserved, middle-tier. Yet something about her stillness unsettled her, though she couldn't articulate why. Rebecca's fingers drifted again across the ring, drawing strength from its weight. The metal had belonged to her father, Jonathan Hale, a man whose life had been defined by integrity rather than noise. He had died 5 years earlier of sudden cardiac arrest, leaving behind not a fortune, but a legacy. His final words to her, whispered in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and fading hope, had been simple: "Wear this when you need strength. It will remind you who you are." She hadn't known then how significant that promise would become. But she wore the ring every day, not out of nostalgia, but devotion, an unshakable loyalty to the man who raised her with truth as his compass. As the morning dragged on, Leela continued making snide comments about the ring, fully unaware that she was mocking something far larger than she could comprehend, something connected to a past that would soon rewrite the present in ways none of them were prepared for. As the clock inched closer to noon, the tension in the office continued to coil tighter. Every now and then, someone attempted small talk, but the atmosphere remained strained, as though everyone could sense the day was building toward something significant. When Elias Rourke finally arrived, his presence seemed to transform the office. Tall, silver-haired, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, he carried an aura of authority that silenced conversations without needing to speak. Leela practically glowed as she approached him, rehearsed smile locked into place. "Mr. Rourke," she said excitedly, "welcome." "We're honored," but Rourke's attention had already shifted past her. His eyes had landed on Rebecca, standing only a few steps behind the group. Or rather, on the ring she wore. The air thinned instantly. "You," Rourke said, pointing directly at Rebecca's hand. "Where did you get that?" Leela let out an awkward laugh. "Oh, that old thing." Rourke stepped forward abruptly, cutting her off. "That," he said, his voice now heavy with recognition, "belonged to Jonathan Hale." Rebecca felt her breath catch. "You knew my father?" she asked softly. Rourke nodded once, his expression shifting, the harsh lines around his mouth easing. "I did. Your father was the reason I ever trusted this company." The hallway seemed to tilt. Leela's expression drained of color. Before anyone could gather their thoughts, Rourke straightened, his demeanor snapping back into its sharp, strategic form. "Cancel the meeting," he commanded. Gasps erupted. "Sir, cancel?" Leela stammered. He didn't repeat himself. He simply walked away, leaving a line of stunned employees behind him. Within minutes, the entire office buzzed with speculation. The whispers were relentless. Rourke canceled the meeting because of Rebecca? Who was her father? Is she connected to old corporate leadership? Why would a billionaire recognize a ring? The gossip grew, twisting through every department like a storm. Rebecca remained quiet, but inside her heart pounded. She hadn't expected this, hadn't anticipated that her father's past was woven deeper into the company's foundation than she ever realized. A few hours later, Rourke returned and asked to speak with her privately. As they walked down the quiet hallway, he revealed the truth she had never been told. Her father had once uncovered a major financial breach, one that implicated Lang, the current head of operations. "He died before he could submit his final report," Rourke said. "And the company did everything it could to bury the remnants. I always suspected sabotage and how quickly his findings disappeared." Rebecca swallowed hard. "He told me, before he passed, that someone was twisting the foundation he helped build," she whispered. "He asked me not to forget the truth." Rourke paused, looking at her with a mixture of respect and sorrow. "Your father was the most honest man I ever met. When I saw that ring, I knew it was time to unearth what he tried to protect." Rebecca felt a steady fire ignite within her. "I didn't come here to collect power," she said quietly. "I came to collect truth." Rourke nodded. "And that," he told her, "is exactly why you're the one who'll change everything." The audit began within the hour, and the company's carefully curated image started to crack. Documents long thought deleted resurfaced. Emails revealed hushed mismanagement. Numbers didn't match. Budgets were falsified. Lang's signature appeared again and again in the darkest corners of the findings. Meanwhile, Leela panicked, realizing the hierarchy she'd relied on was collapsing. The whispers she had once controlled now worked against her as employees began distancing themselves from her arrogance and openly questioning her behavior earlier that morning. Rebecca watched quietly, her presence no longer something easily dismissed. And while she didn't revel in the chaos unfolding around her, she carried a calmness, a clarity, that made others look at her differently. Rourke remained by her side in every meeting, treating her not as a subordinate but as someone whose input mattered. As hours passed, the building fell into a hush of dread and anticipation, as though everyone understood something monumental was coming. When the board finally convened, the conference room was packed, yet silent. Lang entered with bluster, as if confidence alone could rebuild his crumbling facade. "This is absurd," he barked, slamming a folder on the table. "A mid-level employee and a sentimental ring, this is what derails decades of operations." Rebecca looked at him steadily. "You fail to recognize who built this foundation," she said, her voice soft but unshakably firm. "And today, you will remember." Lang scoffed, but Rourke laid the evidence before the board. Every sheet, every signature, every uncovered breach stood undeniable. Lang's face drained as reality swallowed his bravado. In less than 5 minutes, his position dissolved beneath him. The board fired him on the spot. Silence spread through the room, an awe-filled, almost reverent silence. Then, the chairwoman turned to Rebecca. "Would you consider joining the board?" she asked. The question lingered, heavy and monumental. Many in the room leaned in, waiting for her answer. Rebecca's hand returned to the ring, tracing its familiar grooves. She thought of her father, of the hospital room, of the truth he entrusted to her, of the legacy he never got to defend. Slowly, she shook her head. "No," she said. The room collectively inhaled. "You're just leaving?" another board member asked, bewildered. Rebecca lifted her chin, her voice steady and resolute. "I did what I came to do." As Rebecca walked through the office one final time that evening, the atmosphere had completely transformed. People who had overlooked her now watched her with newfound respect, understanding that the quiet woman they once ignored had just altered the company's future. Her steps were slow and deliberate, each one echoing with the weight of what she had uncovered and the liberation that followed. She wasn't leaving out of defeat or frustration, she was leaving because her purpose had been fulfilled. The truth her father died trying to protect had finally been revealed. The corruption he fought against had been destroyed. And the legacy he left behind was no longer buried under arrogance, privilege, or deceit. It lived now, in the company's restructuring, in the board's uncomfortable awakening, in the corridors that would tell this story for years, and in the simple ring she carried with her. As she reached the elevator, the setting sun cast a warm glow on the glass walls, turning the entire floor golden. It felt symbolic, an ending, a beginning, a quiet victory. Rebecca paused, looking out over the city her father once walked through, the world he tried to make better in his own quiet, steadfast way. She placed her hand over the ring, closing her eyes for a moment of silent gratitude. When she stepped into the elevator, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. The building behind her would never forget her name, not because she fought for a title or clawed her way into power, but because she had done something far greater. She had restored the truth. She had honored a legacy. And she had done it without raising her voice, without demanding recognition, without stepping outside her calm, unwavering resolve. In the end, Rebecca Hale didn't rise through the corporate ladder. She didn't need to. She dismantled everything that was built on lies, rebuilt what mattered, and walked away with nothing but the same quiet integrity she arrived with. And sometimes, truth whispered softly does more damage than power screamed loudly. Sometimes the smallest emblem, a simple silver ring, can shake an empire. For more corporate dramas, legacy stories, and power-shifting moments, hit that subscribe button on Wisdom to Revenge.